Alright, so as we look at number 11, now we're finding roots we're solving, so we're going to let this equal 0. This is one of the factors. So we're going to use our synthetic division. Again, this would be a great time to pause the video, try it on your own, come back and check your answers. So we have 1, -1, -15, 3, 36, and bring the 1 down. So 1 times -3, -4 times -3, -3 times -3, 12 times -3, and you're going to get a 0 here. If you didn't get a 0, go back and double check. Since I'm telling you this is a factor, it has to work. So right now we have x plus 3, and we'll rewrite this. This is x to the 4th, so we'll start with x cubed minus 4x squared minus 3x plus 12, and now we equal 0. And so now we look at this, does it have a common factor? If not, since it has 4 terms, we're going to try grouping. And so what's the GCF? What's the biggest thing I could take out of these two? And so I can take an x squared out. And so that gives me x minus 4. And then what's the GCF of these two? What can I take out? So I can take out a -3, so that gives me x minus 4. So now we can group these together. And so we get x squared minus 3, x minus 4. Don't forget to bring this down. And so we have x plus 3, and it equals 0. So since we have a quadratic again, we want to look at this and see if I can factor it. If this were a perfect square, we could do difference of squares, but it's not. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually rewrite all these, make them equal 0. And we'll solve them. Now the first one and the last one you could probably just look at and solve. Just minus 3 from both sides. So we get x equals -3. Now when we solve the middle one, we're going to add 3 to both sides. And so we get x squared equals 3. Now we got to get rid of the x squared, and so we'll take the square root of both sides. And so we end up with x equals plus or minus the square root of 3. Here, add 4. And so we get x equals 4. So now take all your answers, put them together. X equals -3, positive 4, and then plus or minus the square root of 3. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 answers, which is what I should have, x to the 4th. Alright, number 12. Hey, I got an idea. Why don't you pause the video and try this one on your own? So we have one factor, x plus 2, so we'll do our synthetic division. And take your coefficients, 1, -3, -6, -12, -40. Bring the 1 down. Now 1 times -2, -5 times -2, 4 times -2, -20 times -2. So this needs to equal 0. Since I told you this is a factor, it has to equal 0. If it didn't work, go back, figure out why. Alright, so let's write that x plus 2 again. And so now this is going to become x cubed minus 5x squared plus 4x minus 20. equals 0. It doesn't have a GCF, has 4 terms, so let's see if we can group it. What's the GCF? What can you take out? So I can take out an x squared out of both those, so I'm left with x minus 5. Here, I can take out a positive 4, and I'm left with x minus 5. Now I group them together, and so I get x squared plus 4, x minus 5. Bring this down, and this whole thing equals 0. So you should be able to look at that and know that we're going to have x equals negative 2. And you should be able to look at this one and know that x equals 5. And so now, if you need to, you can write x squared plus 4 equals 0 and solve this. So we get minus 4. So now we have x squared equals a negative 4. Now we square root. And so now we're going to have x equals plus or minus. So the square root of negative 4 is going to give us 2i. So we have negative 2, 5, and then plus or minus 2i. So since it was to the 4th power, we should have 4 answers.